My cousin humiliated me at Thanksgiving, mocking my failure while flashing his wealth. The whole table laughed until my boyfriend stood up and dropped a truth bomb that silenced the room. They didn't know I held the power to destroy their financial future. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The nausea started 3 exits before we reached the driveway. It wasn't the car sickness, and it certainly wasn't hunger. It was a deep, visceral rejection of what was about to happen. My body knew, even before my brain fully engaged with the reality, that entering that house was an act of emotional self-immolation. I gripped the passenger door handle of Mark's sedan so hard my knuckles turned a stark, bone white. Outside the window, the suburban landscape of my childhood rolled by, manicured lawns, oversized mailboxes, and the towering oak trees that were shedding their leaves in preparation for winter. It should have been nostalgic. Instead, it felt like I was driving into a trap. "Grace," Mark said softly, his hand leaving the gear shift to cover mine. His palm was warm, grounding. "You're doing it again. You're hyperventilating." I forced myself to take a breath, but the air felt thin. "I'm fine. I hate this. I hate who I become when I'm around them. I turn into this small, stuttering version of myself. It's pathetic." "It's not pathetic," Mark corrected firmly, his eyes briefly flicking away from the road to meet mine. "It's trauma. There's a difference. But remember what we talked about? You don't need their validation. You have nothing to prove to people who are committed to misunderstanding you." I looked at him, my brilliant, steady Mark. He was wearing the charcoal sweater I'd bought him, looking every bit the successful architect he was, though he never felt the need to broadcast it. He knew the truth about me. He knew the long hours, the non-disclosure agreements, the immense pressure I carried in my professional life. He knew that while my family saw a woman in a 5-year-old coat driving a sensible sedan, the corporate world saw a fierce, restructuring consultant capable of saving, or sinking, billion-dollar conglomerates. But logic didn't stop the anxiety. To my family, specifically my Uncle Tristan and his son, my cousin Luke, I was simply Grace. The dropout, the struggler, the one who didn't live up to potential. "They're going to be worse this year," I whispered, the dread pooling in my stomach. "Uncle Tristan's company is going through that merger. He's going to be stressed, which means he's going to be loud, which means he's going to need a punching bag. And Luke? Well, Luke is just Luke." "Let them talk," Mark said, turning the car onto the long, winding street that led to Uncle Tristan's sprawling estate. "We eat, we endure, we leave. 2 hours tops." We pulled up to the house. It was a massive, colonial-style beast of a building, aggressively decorated for the holidays. But what caught my eye immediately wasn't the wreath on the door, it was the driveway. It looked like a luxury car dealership. There was Uncle Tristan's brand new SUV, Rachel's convertible, and right in the center, blocking everyone else in, was a sleeker, newer sports car I didn't recognize. "Luke." "Great," I muttered, unbuckling my seatbelt. "He bought a new toy. We're never going to hear the end of it." I stepped out of the car, the chilly November air biting at my cheeks. I smoothed down my dress, a simple, high-quality wool blend that didn't scream money, just quiet taste. I reached into the back seat to grab the bottle of wine and the homemade pie I'd baked. As we walked up the path, the front door swung open before we even knocked. It wasn't a warm greeting. It was Rachel, Luke's wife. She was dressed in something that sparkled aggressively under the porch lights, holding a glass of champagne. "Oh, look," she shrieked, her voice pitching high enough to shatter glass. "The Wanderer's return. We were taking bets on whether your car would actually make the trip, Grace." She laughed, a sharp, piercing sound. Mark stiffened beside me, his hand tightening on my lower back. "Hi, Rachel," I said, forcing a smile that felt like it was made of cracking plaster. "Good to see you, too." Come in," she ushered us inside, not offering to help with the heavy pie or the wine. Luke is in the living room showing off the specs of the new beast outside. You probably wouldn't understand the engineering, Grace, but Mark might get a kick out of it. I stepped into the foyer, the heat of the house hitting me along with the smell of roasting turkey and expensive cologne. From the living room, I heard Luke's booming voice, followed by the sycophantic laughter of my other relatives. It's a waiting list of X months, Dad, but you know me. I made 2 calls and they delivered it this morning. My stomach turned over. I looked at Mark, who gave me a subtle nod of encouragement. We were in the lion's den now. But as I crossed the threshold, a wave of dizziness hit me, not from fear, but from a sudden, crushing realization. They didn't just think little of me, they actively enjoyed my perceived failure. It was their entertainment. The betrayal wasn't in the insults themselves. It was in the fact that my pain was the centerpiece of their celebration. The living room was suffocatingly warm, the fireplace roaring despite the fact that the thermostat was likely set to 75. Uncle Tristan was holding court in his leather armchair, a glass of scotch resting on his knee. He looked older than the last time I'd seen him, hair thinner, face ruddier, but the arrogance was untouched by time. Standing by the mantel was Luke, my cousin, the golden boy. He was wearing a suit that cost more than my first car, his wrist adorned with a watch that was aggressively large. When he saw us enter, his eyes didn't light up with warmth, they lit up with the predatory gleam of a cat spotting a mouse. Well, well, Luke boomed, spreading his arms wide but making no move to actually hug me. If it isn't the freelance queen, what is it you're doing now? Blog writing? Etsy knitting? The room chuckled. My aunt, sitting on the sofa, covered her mouth to hide a smile. I'm a consultant, Luke, I said quietly, placing the pie on the side table since no one had offered to take it to the kitchen. I work in corporate restructuring. Restructuring? Uncle Tristan scoffed, taking a sip of his scotch. That's a fancy word for temp work, isn't it? Shuffling papers for people who actually make decisions. Something like that, I said, keeping my voice neutral. I felt Mark bristle beside me. I gave his arm a gentle squeeze, a silent signal to stand down. Not yet. Well, in the real world, Luke said, stepping forward and clapping Mark on the shoulder, ignoring me entirely, business is booming. I just closed the tri-state deal. Regional manager isn't just a title, Mark, it's a lifestyle. You see the car out front. Hard to miss, Mark said, his tone dry. You parked it diagonally across the entire driveway. Luke missed the sarcasm entirely. Exactly, dominance, you have to claim your space. Grace wouldn't know about that, driving that little. What is it? A Honda. Toyota, I corrected automatically. Right, cute, Luke smirked. He turned back to his father. Anyway, Dad, like I was saying, with the merger coming up at your place, you need to be aggressive. Don't let these new auditors push you around. You're a legacy executive. They can't touch you. I froze. My heart hammered a sudden, violent rhythm against my ribs. The merger. I took a slow sip of the water I'd poured myself, trying to mask the sudden intake of breath. Uncle Tristan worked for Red Leaf Manufacturing. It was a mid-sized industrial firm that had been bleeding money for 3 years due to bloated middle management and inefficiency. It had just been acquired by Apex Holdings. And Apex Holdings was my client. In fact, I wasn't just a consultant on that account. I was the lead strategy officer for the transition. I had the org charts on my encrypted laptop in the trunk of Mark's car. I had spent the last 3 weeks analyzing every single department head's performance, salary, and redundancy risk. They're sending in some special team from the city, Uncle Tristan grumbled, looking into his glass. Bunch of kids with spreadsheets who have never set foot on a factory floor. I'm not worried. I've been there 20 years, I'm indispensable. I looked at my uncle. I knew his file by heart. Robert Tristan, VP of Logistics. I knew his salary. I knew his expense reports, which were flagged for irregularities regarding personal travel. And I knew that his name was currently on the Tier 1 review for termination list. The only reason it hadn't been stamped, approved, yet was because I, Grace, the niece he was currently mocking, had personally put a hold on his file 3 days ago. I wanted to double-check the compliance issues before I let the axe fall on a family member. I had risked my professional objectivity to buy him time. "You really think you're safe?" I asked, my voice cutting through the chatter. It was the first time I'd spoken voluntarily. Uncle Tristan looked at me with disdain. "Excuse me." "The merger," I said, keeping my face impassive. "Acquisitions usually mean cutting redundancies. If they're sending a team from the city, they're looking at the numbers, not the tenure." "Oh, listen to her," Rachel laughed, chiming in from the doorway. "Grace is giving business advice now. Did you read that in an article somewhere, sweetie?" "I'm just saying," I continued, feeling a strange, cold calm settling over me. "The market is volatile. Indispensable is a dangerous word." "Stick to your little gigs, Grace," Uncle Tristan sneered, dismissing me with a wave of his hand. "Leave the corporate strategy to the men who actually run the world. I'm not worried about some faceless consultant. I'd eat them for breakfast." I looked down at my shoes. "You have no idea," I thought. "You're trying to eat the shark while you're swimming in its tank." But they had forgotten one crucial thing, I thought, the realization sharpening my focus like a blade. They assumed silence was weakness. They didn't know that silence is where the real work gets done. To understand why this moment stung so much, you have to understand what I gave up to get here. I didn't just fall behind as my family assumed. 7 years ago, when my mother, Tristan's sister, got sick, I was on the fast track at a top firm in Chicago. I was 22, hungry and brilliant, but Mom needed full-time care and we couldn't afford the facility. So I quit. I moved home. I spent 4 years changing sheets, managing medications, and working remote freelance gigs at 3:00 a.m. just to keep the lights on. My family saw the freelance part. They didn't see the nights I slept in a hospital chair. They didn't see me building a network of high-level contacts from my laptop while my mother slept. When she passed, I didn't return to the entry-level rat race. I leveraged those contacts to launch my own consultancy, specializing in the grim but lucrative business of corporate restructuring. I became a ghost. Companies hired me to do the hard things, the cuts, the pivots, the cleanups. I signed NDAs thicker than phone books. I couldn't brag about my wins on Facebook. I couldn't tell Uncle Tristan that the reason his company's stock jumped last quarter was because I advised the board to sell off a toxic asset division. So to them, I was just Grace, the girl who paused her life and never really restarted it. And Luke was the antithesis of everything I stood for. He walked over to where Mark and I were standing, swirling his drink. He was the kind of man who thought volume equaled intelligence. He worked in sales, which fit him perfectly. He could sell ice to a polar bear, mostly by bullying the bear into thinking it wasn't cool enough without the ice. "So Mark," Luke said, leaning in too close, invading personal space as a dominance tactic. "When are you going to upgrade the ring? I saw what Grace is wearing. A little modest, isn't it, for an architect?" Mark's jaw tightened. "Grace picked the ring. She likes vintage." "Vintage," Luke snorted. "That's code for pawn shop, right?" He laughed at his own joke, looking around the room for approval. Uncle Tristan chuckled. Rachel smirked. "It's actually a 1920s Art Deco piece," I said, my voice steady. "I love it." Sure, Luke said dismissively. "Look, I'm just saying in my line of work, image is everything. You project success, you get success. That's why I just bought the vacation home in Aspen. Closing on it next month. You guys should come out sometime. Oh, wait, it's pretty pricey during ski season. Maybe off-season, when the rates drop." He took a sip of his drink, his eyes scanning me from head to toe. "Seriously, Grace, have you thought about asking Dad for an internship? I know he jokes, but he could probably find you something in the mailroom. Get you some benefits? Dental." "I have excellent insurance, Luke," I said. "Through Mark, I bet," Rachel chimed in. "No," I said, "through my company." "Your company?" Luke made air quotes with his fingers. "Right, the LLC you run out of your living room. Listen, I'm trying to help you. We're family." It's embarrassing, frankly. We're all here, moving up, making moves, and you're just stagnant. It reflects bad on us. There it was, the core of it. I wasn't just a failure to them, I was a stain on their brand. I'm happy with my life, Luke, I said. Are you? He stepped closer, his cologne overpowering. Because you look tired, you look like you're struggling, and honestly, it's hard to watch. Dad's been carrying the family legacy, I'm taking it to the next level, and you're just drifting. Uncle Tristan called out from the armchair. Leave her be, Luke. Some people just aren't built for the high life. The world needs worker bees, right? I suppose, Luke sighed, checking his massive watch. All right, everyone, dinner is in 10 minutes, I hope you're hungry. I paid for the catering this year since Mom was tired, top shelf. None of that grocery store stuff. He shot a pointed look at my homemade pie. Mark looked at me, his eyes burning with a defensive fury. I placed a hand on his chest, feeling the rapid beat of his heart. Don't, I whispered. They're tearing you apart, he hissed. I know, I said, but the night is young. I looked at Luke, who was now instructing his mother on how to set the table properly. He looked so confident, so untouchable, he had no idea that the worker bee, standing in the corner, was the only reason his father hadn't received a termination notice via FedEx yesterday morning. But as I watched them laugh and high-five over some inside joke about a colleague they'd fired, something in me shifted. The loyalty I had held onto, the guilt that had made me pause Uncle Tristan's file, began to evaporate. They wanted to talk about success. They wanted to talk about who made it. Let's eat, I said to Mark, a small, cold smile touching my lips. I'm suddenly very hungry. The dining room was a theater of excess. The table was groaning under the weight of silver platters, crystal glassware, and an oversized centerpiece that blocked the view of anyone sitting opposite you. I found myself seated at the far end, the children's seat, usually reserved for the youngest cousins, though I was 29 years old. Mark was squeezed in next to me, his knee pressing firmly against mine under the table, a constant, silent signal of solidarity. Dinner was a masterclass in passive-aggressive exclusion. The conversation flowed around us like water around a stone. Luke dominated the airspace, regaling the table with stories of his conquests in the sales world, dropping dollar amounts like punctuation marks. So I told the guy, Luke said, gesturing with a forkful of stuffing, you want the premium package, you pay the premium price. Bam, sign the check right there. That's how I funded the down payment on the Aspen place. Cash flow, Dad. It's all about cash flow. That's my boy, Uncle Tristan beamed, slicing into the turkey with a little too much force. You've got the killer instinct, unlike some people who are content to just exist. He didn't look at me, but the pause was directed squarely at my plate. I kept my head down, pushing a dry piece of turkey around in the gravy. Don't engage, I told myself, just survive the meal. But then came the toast. It was the moment Luke had clearly been rehearsing. He stood up, tapping his crystal goblet with a silver knife until the room fell silent. He smoothed his silk tie, a smirk playing on his lips that made my stomach churn. All right, everyone, listen up, Luke announced. I want to propose a toast, to family, to success. He raised his glass higher, his eyes scanning the room before landing on me with a heavy, mocking weight. To everyone at this table who actually made it in life, to the winners. He paused for effect, letting the insult hang in the air. Except you, obviously, Grace, he added, his voice dripping with faux pity. But hey, someone has to clear the table, right? The table erupted. It wasn't just a chuckle, it was a roar of laughter. Rachel threw her head back, her earrings catching the light. Uncle Tristan slapped the table, his face red with mirth. Even my aunt offered a sympathetic but amused smile, as if Luke were just being a mischievous child rather than a 30-year-old bully. I felt the blood drain from my face. The humiliation was physical, a cold knot tightening in my chest. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but my throat had closed up. Beside me, the chair scraped loudly against the hardwood floor. Mark stood up. The laughter died down, replaced by confused murmurs. Mark wasn't a loud man. He was an architect. He built things that lasted. He didn't tear things down. But as he stood there, smoothing his sweater, he looked taller than I had ever seen him. He didn't look angry. He looked precise. He smiled politely at Luke, then turned his gaze to Uncle Tristan. "Funny," Mark said, his voice calm, carrying effortlessly to every corner of the room. "Because she's the reason your father still has a job." The silence that followed was absolute. You could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. Luke blinked, his glass still half raised. "Excuse me, what did you just say?" "I said," Mark continued, his tone conversational, "that Grace is the only reason Tristan hasn't been fired yet. You were laughing about her little hobbies, but you seem to have missed the fact that she's the lead restructuring officer for the company that just bought Red Leaf." Uncle Tristan dropped his fork. It clattered loudly against the china. "That's ridiculous," he sputtered, looking from Mark to me. "Grace, she's a freelance writer. She barely scrapes by." I looked up then. The fear was gone, replaced by a strange, icy clarity. The investigative switch in my brain had flipped. I wasn't the niece anymore. I was the auditor. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. I didn't need a laptop. I had the secure executive portal app. I unlocked it with my thumbprint, the screen glowing with the familiar blue interface of Apex Holdings. "I haven't written an article in 5 years, Uncle Tristan," I said softly. My voice was steady now. "I'm a senior partner at Sterling and Associates. Apex hired me 6 months ago to clean up their acquisition of Red Leaf." I tapped the screen, navigating to the Personnel Review tab. "And right now," I said, not looking up from the screen, "I'm looking at a file marked T. Miller, VP of Logistics. It has a big red flag on it." Uncle Tristan's face went from red to a ghostly, mottled gray. He tried to laugh, but it came out as a wet, choking sound. "This is a joke," Tristan stammered, looking around the table for support. "Luke, tell them it's a joke. She's lying. She's trying to save face because you roasted her." "It's gotta be a lie," Luke scoffed, though his confidence was visibly wavering. He stepped toward me, aggressive again. "Let me see that phone. You probably just made a fake screenshot. You're pathetic, Grace. You're really going to pretend you're some big-shot executive." "I wouldn't touch that if I were you," Mark said, stepping between Luke and me. "That phone contains confidential corporate data protected by federal trade secret laws. If you touch it, she can have you arrested for corporate espionage before dessert is served." Luke froze. The legal terminology, delivered with Mark's calm authority, hit a nerve. "Tristan," I said, looking directly at my uncle, "last Tuesday, you received a notice of audit regarding the shipping contracts with North Star Distributors. You ignored it." Tristan's eyes widened. How do you know about North Star?" "Because I wrote the notice," I replied. "And I know you ignored it because I got the alert on my dashboard at 9:00 a.m. on Wednesday. You told your secretary, what's her name? Brenda, to file it in the trash because, and I quote from her deposition notes, 'Those bean counters don't know how real business works.'" The room was deathly quiet. Rachel had stopped drinking her champagne. My aunt was staring at her husband with dawning horror. You're the G. Sterling on the emails," Tristan whispered. The realization hit him like a physical blow. I thought that was a man, George or Gregory." "Grace," I corrected. "Grace Sterling. I use my middle name professionally. And for the record, Uncle Tristan, I'm the one who put the do not execute order on your termination file last week." "Termination?" Rachel squeaked. "Tristan, what is she talking about?" "They were going to fire you," I said, my voice hardening. "The algorithm flagged your department for 40% inefficiency. The Apex board wanted to cut the entire logistics leadership team immediately. I stopped them. I told them I needed to do a personal deep dive because I suspected there was salvageable value. I lied to them, Tristan. I lied to save you because you're family." I didn't know," Tristan stammered. He wiped sweat from his forehead with a napkin. Grace, look, it's just dinner talk. You know how we are, we tease, it's affection. Affection? I stood up slowly. You just watched your son humiliate me in front of the entire family and you laughed. You called me a loser. You mocked the car I drive, a car, by the way, that I drive because I invest 60% of my income into a blind trust, not because I'm broke. We can fix this, Luke interrupted, trying to regain control of the narrative. He put on his salesman's smile, though it looked brittle. Okay, so Grace has a cool job. Great. That's great news, cause we should celebrate. Why didn't you tell us? We could have partnered up. I could sell for you. I don't need you to sell for me, Luke, I said coldly, and we're not partners. But wait, I continued, looking back at my phone as a new notification popped up. I frowned. This is interesting. What? Tristan asked, his voice trembling. I'm looking at the North Star distributor invoices now, I said, scrolling through the PDF that had just loaded. I flagged them because the rates were 20% above market average. But now that I'm looking at the vendor details, the registered address for North Star distributors seems familiar. I looked up at Luke. Luke, what is the address of that new vacation home in Aspen you just bought? The color drained from Luke's face so fast it looked like the blood had simply evaporated. He took a step back, bumping into the mantel. What? Luke croaked. That's private. Why does that matter? Because, I said, tapping the screen, North Star Distributors is registered to a P.O. box in Aspen, Colorado. But the LLC filing... Oh, look at that. The registered agent is L. Miller Holdings. I looked at Mark, then back at my family. The pieces were clicking together in my mind with terrifying precision. The investigation phase of my job usually took weeks. Here, at this dinner table, it was taking minutes. Tristan, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, please tell me you didn't. I don't know what you're talking about, Tristan said, but he was gripping the table so hard his knuckles were white. It's a coincidence, a common name. It's not a coincidence, I snapped the professional ven, ear cracking just enough to show the anger beneath. I investigate fraud for a living. Do you think I'm stupid? You've been approving inflated invoices from a shell company owned by your son. You're funneling red leaf money into Luke's real estate investments. It's not stealing, Luke shouted, his composure shattering. It's consulting North Star provides, logistic support. North Star doesn't exist, I countered, my voice rising. I checked the manifesto. They have no trucks, no warehouse, no employees. It's a paper company. You're billing your father's company for services never rendered, and he's approving it. It was a bridge loan, Tristan yelled, standing up. The market was tough. Luke needed the capital for the down payment. We were going to pay it back after the sales bonus came in. It's internal, it's harmless. Harmless? I laughed, a harsh, incredulous sound. It's embezzlement, Uncle Tristan. It's a felony. And you did it while your company was under federal audit during an acquisition. Grace, stop, my aunt pleaded, tears streaming down her face. Please just stop typing, put the phone away. I can't, I said, because now I am liable. If I know about this and I don't report it, I lose my license. I go to jail along with you. You wouldn't, Luke sneered, though he looked terrified. Your family, you won't turn us in, you're too soft. That's why you're a loser, Grace. You don't have the stomach for the real game. The real game? I looked at him. Luke, you're not playing a game. You're robbing a bank and posting about it on Instagram. You think you're a shark, you're a parasite. I looked down at my phone. The evidence was irrefutable. The digital trail connected Tristan's authorization codes directly to the bank account that funded Luke's success. Here is the situation, I said, my voice turning clinically cold. I have a fiduciary duty to Apex Holdings. I have a report due Monday morning regarding the final restructuring plan. Grace, please, Uncle Tristan begged, rounding the table to grab my arm. Mark stepped forward instantly, blocking him. Tristan recoiled, looking small and old. Grace, I'm 58 years old. If I lose this job, if they find out, I lose the pension, I lose the house. Rachel and I, we have nothing saved. It all went to the cars, the lifestyle. We thought we had more time. You spent your pension on a Porsche and a shell company for your son, I said, feeling a wave of disgust. And then you invited me here to mock me for being poor. We were wrong, Tristan wept. He was actually crying now, ugly, desperate sobs. We were wrong, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, just delete the file, please, you're the boss, right? You can make it go away. Just tell them the audit was clean. I looked at the weeping man who had sneered at me 20 minutes ago. I looked at Luke, who was frantically texting on his phone, probably trying to move money that was already frozen, though he didn't know it yet. I can't make it go away, Tristan, I said. The system logs every query. I've already opened the files. If I suppress this, I go down. So you're going to ruin us, Rachel screamed. You're going to send your own uncle to prison. I looked at Mark. He gave me a look of profound sadness, but also strength. He knew what I had to do. I'm not the one who ruined you, I said, picking up my purse. You did that yourselves. I'm just the one who turned on the lights. I tapped the screen one last time. Forward to legal compliance, high priority. It's done, I said. The legal team has the file. You'll probably hear from them on Monday, or maybe sooner, given the amount of money involved. You bitch, Luke lunged forward, his face twisted in rage. Sit down, Luke, Mark barked, his voice booming like a cannon shot. It was so loud, so commanding, that Luke actually stumbled back and fell into his chair. We're leaving, Mark said, taking my hand. Do not follow us, do not call us. We turned to the door. Behind us, the sound of weeping and the crash of a glass shattering against the wall echoed through the house. The winners at the table had lost everything, and the loser was walking out, head held high, into the cold, clean air of the night. The weekend passed in a blur of silence that was louder than any screaming match. My phone had been turned off since Friday night, buried in a drawer in the kitchen. Mark and I spent Saturday and Sunday in a kind of bunker mode, hiking in the woods where there was no cell service, cooking elaborate meals, and refusing to acknowledge the nuclear bomb I had detonated at the dinner table. But Monday morning arrived with the inevitability of a tidal wave. I drove to the Red Leaf manufacturing headquarters not in my sensible Toyota, but in the black town car sent by Apex Holdings. It was a small flex, a necessary shift in optics. Today, I wasn't the niece. I wasn't Grace from the kids' table. I was the lead strategy officer, and I was arriving to execute a corporate death sentence. The lobby of Red Leaf was buzzing with the nervous energy that always precedes a major restructuring. Whispers stopped as I walked through the glass doors, my heels clicking rhythmically on the polished marble. I was wearing my armor, a tailored navy suit, stark and sharp, with my ID badge clipped to the lapel. The badge that identified me as external audit, level 5 clearance. I took the elevator to the executive floor. The conference room was already full. The Apex transition team sat on one side, lawyers, accountants, HR specialists. On the other side sat the Red Leaf executives, looking pale and nauseous. And there, at the end of the table, sat Uncle Tristan. He looked like he had aged 10 years in 48 hours. His suit was rumpled, his eyes bloodshot. He was clutching a coffee cup with both hands to stop them from shaking. When I walked in, he looked up, a flicker of desperate hope crossing his face. He still thought, deep down, that blood would be thicker than the federal statutes regarding embezzlement. Good morning, I said, placing my laptop on the podium at the head of the room. I didn't make eye contact with Tristan. Let's begin. We have a significant variance in the logistics budget that needs to be addressed immediately. I projected the spreadsheet onto the massive screen behind me. It was the North Star Distributors account history. As you can see, I began, my voice amplified by the room's acoustics, we have identified a systematic drain of capital totaling $400,000 over 18 months, funneled into a vendor that does not exist. A murmur went through the room. The other Red Leaf executives shifted away from Tristan, sensing the contagion. There must be a mistake, Tristan croaked, standing up shakily. I can explain. It was a logistical holding strategy. We were pivoting. It wasn't a pivot, Tristan, I said, my voice echoing in the silent room. It was theft. Suddenly, the heavy double doors at the back of the room burst open. Security shouted, "Sir, you can't go in there." But it was too late. Luke stormed into the boardroom. He looked manic. His hair was disheveled, and he was wearing a tracksuit, looking like he hadn't slept in days. He had clearly bypassed the reception desk in a panic, likely assuming he could talk his way out of this before the police warrants were finalized. "Don't listen to her," Luke shouted, pointing a shaking finger at me. "She's lying, she's vindictive. This is a family dispute she's trying to bring into the office." The Apex security team moved to intercept, but I held up a hand. "Wait," I said, "let him speak." I wanted the room to see this. I wanted the public nature of this breakdown to be absolute. Luke rushed to the table, ignoring the shocked faces of the board members. He grabbed his father's shoulder. "Dad, tell them you authorized the payments. Tell them it was your idea to use North Star as a tax shelter. You told me to set it up." The room gasped. Tristan froze. He looked up at his son, the son he had idolized, the son he had mocked me for, the son he had stolen from his own pension to support. "Luke," Tristan whispered, his voice trembling with betrayal. You said it was a loan, you said you'd pay it back. Now you're saying, it was my idea." "We have to stick to the story, Dad," Luke hissed, loud enough for everyone to hear. "If you take the fall, they might go easy on you because of your tenure. If I take the fall, I lose the Aspen house. I lose the cars. You're old, you're retiring anyway, just take the hit." It was the moment of total clarity. The silence in the room was suffocating. Everyone, the lawyers, the executives, the administrative assistants, stared at Luke in horror. He was asking his father to go to prison to save his own sports car. Tristan slowly stood up. He pushed Luke's hand off his shoulder. He looked at his son, really looked at him, for the first time in years. He didn't see a golden boy. He saw a desperate, selfish child who would burn his own father to keep himself warm. "I didn't tell you to set it up," Tristan said, his voice gaining strength, though tears were streaming down his face. "You came to me begging. You said you were in debt. You said the loan sharks were coming. I signed those invoices to save your life, Luke, not to buy you a vacation home." Tristan turned to me. He looked broken, stripped of all his arrogance. "Grace," he said, addressing me formally in front of the entire board. "I authorized the payments, but I did it under duress from my son. I surrender my position. I will cooperate fully with the investigation." "You idiot," Luke screamed, lunging at his father. "You're ruining everything." Security was on him in a second. 2 large guards tackled Luke to the plush carpet. As he was pinned down, screaming obscenities, the doors opened again. This time, it wasn't a relative. It was 2 officers from the Economic Crimes Division, accompanied by the Apex Corporate Counsel. "Luke Miller," one officer said, pulling Luke up and spinning him around to cuff his hands behind his back. "We have a warrant for your arrest for wire fraud, grand larceny, and conspiracy to commit embezzlement." No, Luke thrashed, his face pressed against the glass wall of the conference room. "It's a mistake. My cousin, she's framing me. Grace, tell them." He looked at me, his eyes wide with terror. "Grace, we're family. You can't let them take me." I stood behind the podium, watching the scene unfold with a detachment that surprised even me. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt a heavy, finalized sense of justice. "We were family on Thursday, Luke," I said quietly, though the room was so silent my voice carried clearly. "But you made it very clear that family is for people who made it. And right now, you haven't made it." The officers dragged him out, his screams echoing down the hallway until the elevator doors slid shut. Tristan collapsed into his chair, burying his face in his hands. The room remained silent, waiting for my command. "Meeting adjourned," I said, closing my laptop. "HR, Please escort Mr. Miller to his office to collect his personal effects. Legal, I want the full forensic report on the district attorney's desk by noon. The fallout was swift, brutal, and total. By Wednesday, the story had hit the local business journals. Executive VP and son indicted in logistics fraud scheme. The golden boy image Luke had cultivated so carefully crumbled instantly. It turned out the Aspen house wasn't the only lie. The sports car was leased in the company's name. His sales awards were fabricated certificates he'd printed himself. He was a hollow man, built of papier-mâché and arrogance, and I had simply struck the match. Luke was denied bail due to flight risk. Apparently, he had been looking up one-way tickets to non-extradition countries the night of the dinner. He was facing a minimum of 5 years in federal prison. Uncle Tristan fared slightly better, but his life as he knew it was over. Because he cooperated and provided evidence against Luke, he avoided prison time, receiving probation instead. But Red Leaf and Apex stripped him of everything. His pension was seized to pay back the stolen funds. He was fired for cause, meaning no severance, no benefits, no golden parachute. The sprawling house with the manicured lawn was put on the market the following week. It was a foreclosure sale. 2 months later, on a crisp January afternoon, I sat in a coffee shop in the city, waiting for Mark. I had just finished the final handover of the Red Leaf project. The company was lean, efficient, and profitable again. My job was done. My phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. I opened it. We're moving into a 2-bedroom apartment in Deerfield today. It's small. Rachel is selling her jewelry to pay for the mover. I just wanted to say, I know you did your job, and I know I deserved it. I'm sorry I didn't see you before. You're the only one of us who actually built something real. Uncle Tristan. I stared at the screen for a long time. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I deleted the message, blocked the number, and set the phone down on the table. Forgiveness was a nice concept, but boundaries were a survival tactic. I wasn't angry anymore, but I wasn't available either. The bell above the door chimed, and Mark walked in. He was wearing a thick scarf and carrying a rolled-up set of blueprints. He spotted me and smiled, that warm, genuine smile that made me feel safe. He sat down and slid a coffee toward me. Done with the handover. Done, I said, taking a sip. The file is closed. Good, Mark said, because I have some news. Remember that design competition I entered, the sustainable housing project? Yes. I won, he beamed. First prize, and the commission that comes with it. Well, let's just say we won't have to worry about the mortgage for a very long time. I reached across the table and took his hand. That's amazing, Mark. I'm so proud of you. We should celebrate, he said. Maybe a fancy dinner, or, he grinned mischievously, we could just go home, order pizza, and not talk to anyone for the rest of the weekend. Pizza, I said immediately. Definitely pizza. We walked out of the coffee shop into the bustling city street. The wind was cold, but the sun was shining. I thought about Luke, sitting in a cell awaiting trial. I thought about Tristan, packing boxes in a house he could no longer afford. I thought about the toxicity that had defined my family dynamic for decades, the constant measuring, the belittling, the desperate need to appear better than. It was all gone. I tightened my grip on Mark's hand. We walked toward the subway, just 2 people in the crowd. No fancy cars, no loud boasts, no look-at-me displays of wealth. Just quiet, unshakable success. And for the first time in my life, I realized I didn't need to prove it to anyone. I didn't need a toast at Thanksgiving to know I had made it. I had the work I loved, the man I loved, and the peace of mind that comes from knowing exactly who you are. The worker bee had survived the winter. The drones had not. And that was victory enough.